My name is Julie Pearson Littlefender. Today is May 4th, 2011, and I'm at the Chickasaw Nation Communications headquarters interviewing artist Jeannie Barbour. And am I pronouncing that right?
Barbour.
Barbour. Okay.
Barbour.
Jeannie, you're currently the creative director of communications with Chickasaw Nation.
Yes.
But you're also a well-established graphic artist whose work has received many honors and awards over the years. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in McKinney, Texas, and early on my family moved to Los Angeles, California. So I actually grew up and spent most of my younger years in Los Angeles. But in high school, our family moved back to Oklahoma, and so from high school all the way through college and all of my adult life I have spent here in Oklahoma.
What did your folks do for a living?
Well, my father, my biological father, he is a metal artist. He works in metal, and he likes to make jewelry and like that, but for the most part he spent most of his life working either for ring companies or for medallion companies, and he was a designer. My mother is a retired nurse, and of course she loves the arts as well and dabbles a little bit in drawing and painting herself.
Looks like you inherited talent from both sides. Are both sides of your family Chickasaw?
No, just my father's side. And yeah, as far as the Chickasaw side, we have many artists in that side of the family. In fact, my great uncle is Claiborne Strawn, who was a sculptor, and really he was also a very excellent illustrator. Illustrated for the Journal Record and some other newspapers and magazines.
Did you have much contact with your either set of grandparents, or was that more after you moved back to Oklahoma?
As far as the Chickasaw side, it was more after I moved back to Oklahoma. Now, on my mother's side, a lot of her family is in California, which is the primary reason why we moved there. So I had a lot of contact growing up with her side of the family, the non-Indian side. But I always kept in contact with my granny, who was my great-grandmother. She was an original enrollee for the tribe. And also my grandmother, her name escapes me right now. I can't believe that. I'm so nervous.
Don't worry about it. We will insert it there.
Okay.
So, what are your earliest
Lillian.
Lillian. Okay. Yes, that's fine.
Lillian.
What are your earliest memories of doing art?
Oh my goodness. I can't remember a time where I wasn't drawing or painting or doing something. I think the earliest piece of artwork that was saved by my family, I was 4 years old, and I attempted to draw my little brother after he was born. And of course he's like enormous, and my mom is like this little person. There's some sort of psychological thing there, I'm sure. But anyways, he was probably my first portrait, and it's still in the family, that drawing. I was 4.
In elementary or primary school and secondary school, were you able to take art classes? Did they offer art classes?
Yes, the Los Angeles school system had a tremendous program for arts and music and dance and that sort of thing. So I felt very fortunate to grow up, getting to take art classes in the public school systems. And also, I participated in different clubs and like that, especially in junior high, where I got to paint and draw, and I remember having the opportunity to work with the folks that created puppets with Jim Henson, and that was a lot of fun. Enjoyed that immensely. For a 7th grader, that was like
bet.
terrific.
You've mentioned some of your extended family members who were artists. When did you see your first piece of Indian art, your first Indian painting?
When I was a kid, in different, I guess you would call them trips that the school would take to museums in Los Angeles. Of course, once again, there are a lot of really wonderful museums to go see, and I think my first piece of Indian art was a painting that I saw in a museum. Of course, they were mission Indians, and I had always grown up knowing that I had Indian blood, and my mom made sure that I understood the history and a lot of the connections that I had with the Chickasaw Nation. So my sister and I, we always knew that was a very special part of who we were.
So she really encouraged your exploring that. Did you happen to go to any Indian doings out in LA or?
No. I do remember, and this is very odd, but I do remember going to a car dealership one time because we were looking for a new car, and it was on the weekend. They were having some big celebration, and they had a fancy dancer there. This was the first fancy dancer I had ever seen, and I was just fascinated. I probably was in the 5th grade, but I just couldn't take my eyes off of him. I thought it was fabulous, and that was really probably the first time I actually got to see somebody in regalia, and it was very, very exciting for me.
So in high school as well, you're being offered art classes, taking art classes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a particularly outstanding teacher at that level that really encouraged you, or?
Yes. By then I had moved to Oklahoma, and I attended Wilson High School, which is a really small town near Ardmore. And that's really actually where a lot of my family is located. And I remember Mrs. Kanega. She was my art teacher. Loved her, just absolutely loved her. I don't know if she's still teaching, and I haven't heard from her since I graduated from high school many eons ago. But she encouraged us in one of our projects to do portrait illustrations in stippling of family members, and I chose to do one of a really old photograph of my grandmother back when she was going to Wilson High School as a young teenager. And I just loved that project. I used to have that piece of art, but I've lost it in one of my many moves.
When did you sell your first piece of artwork?
Oh my, let me think. It was probably after college. I sold my first piece of artwork at an art show. It was a local art show in Ardmore, and somebody expressed an interest in it. It wasn't a piece of Indian art. I had illustrated a car, an old, antique car, and this gentleman liked it, and he bought it, and so I was so excited because
Do you remember
now
the
I
price?
was professional.
Yes.
$65, something
Wow,
like that.
that's pretty good.
I thought so.
Back in those days. You got an associate's degree in fine art from Murray State College.
Yes.
How did your classes there help prepare you for your career?
When I first started at Murray, I didn't know the first thing about what I was doing. I had always loved art, and I painted, and it was sort of self-taught, except for the art, that I did and the instruction I got in the public school systems. But really, I didn't know what I was doing. I had stretched this enormous canvas and painted a giant fish. And
Wow.
my painting instructor was very kind in critiquing me. He showed me mercy, but at the end of all things, it was suggested that perhaps I should gesso over that and start over again. So his name was Mr. Milligan, and I owe a lot of gratitude and I have a lot of respect for that man because he took, this novice person who didn't know the first thing about what they were doing, who wanted to make a career of it, and really kind of showed me the avenues to take in order to try and make a career of doing artwork. They always talk about starving artists, and he was always very honest. It's going to be a rough road, but he helped me a great deal in my first attempts at trying to become a professional at it.
So you sort of knew from pretty early on, even at Murray, that you wanted to be an artist. That was what.
Yes, I did. I knew since grade school that that's really all I wanted to do. Now I was interested in writing, but I really thought I was better at art, so that's what I concentrated on.
You went to OSU after Murray State College, and you got a BFA in graphic design and three-dimensional design.
Yes.
And can you explain three-dimensional design?
Well, I just had a knack for it for some reason.
Is it for engineering, or I was intrigued by the.
Well, it was sculpture actually, and it was modern sculpture, which of course my uncle did very realistic pieces when he was alive of sculpture, bronze sculpture representing Indian people, and I had taken a class, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the professor right off the bat, but he really sparked my interest in modern, art and sculpture, and so I did. I participated in kind of a group art project in his class, in which we took objects, normal everyday objects, and took them out of what their normal reality would be and put them somewhere else. And my object was a giant roll of Charmin bathroom tissue. And I made it into a costume, and we walked around campus and videotaped me. I've got that videotape somewhere. And there was a banana in our group, and we just did some crazy things. And so the three-dimensional design was fantastic. I loved it. Never thought that would be something that I would be interested in. But of course, painting and drawing was really first love. And my painting teacher at that time was Marty Averett, and just love him to death. He was always concerned with your artistic integrity. That seemed to be the speech I would get a lot.
Were you doing any Indian subject matter at all at OSU, or not yet?
Very little, not really. My uncle was encouraging me to get into it, but most of what I was doing at that time was I was very intrigued with photorealism and doing objects and portraits of people I knew, and that's basically what I was doing at college. I didn't really get into the Native American art until later on, when I got the job here at Chickasaw Nation. That was 21 years ago, but really felt like if I was going to, represent the tribe, that I really needed to do a lot more study and talk to some of the tribal elders. And that was actually a suggestion that Benjamin Harjo gave me. at an art show once. He looked at some of my art. He was kind enough to look at some of my art and critique for me. And he said, you know, you need to talk to your elders. You need to really study some of the traditions and start representing, you know, your people. And so that's really how that started. And like I said, that was like 20 some odd years ago.
So in the early, are we at the 90s at this point? Mm-hmm.
Late 80s, early 90s.
Well, I think there was a lot of, you know, Indian artists sort of had a struggle with, you know, wanting in some cases to represent their own tribes, but feeling like there wasn't really a market for that if they were, you know, one of the 5 tribes. When you started doing Indian images, and it sounds like maybe were you doing some Plains images as well then? And that's
started out with, you know, going and photographing at different powwows, dancers who would allow me to do it. You know, I would ask first, and you know, doing, you know, regalia and really trying to represent them as best I could, not knowing what their culture was, and Ben Harjo liked what I was doing, but felt like I should really concentrate on my own tribe. It had never occurred to me, and so I thought, you know, I do need to do that. And of course, Southeastern art really wasn't being done at that time. Nobody was out there representing Mississippian period symbolism or going to stomp dance and trying to do that in a big way. And so
it was present, I think, in some of the other media a little bit more strongly than in painting. Yeah.
Right. And I really, in the beginning, when I first came to the tribe, it was difficult to talk to different folks. It wasn't until maybe 4 or 5 years down the line when people felt comfortable with telling you things about, you know, certain cultural aspects of the tribe, about stomp dance, about the songs, and some of the oral traditions that, you know, I began to really see, hey, there's just such a rich and interesting you know, culture that we have. And you know, my mom told me all that she could when I was growing up, but really she was non-Indian, and I really, most of what I have learned has come from the last 20 years or so, just you know, talking to tribal elders that have shown an appreciation for what I'm trying to do and for the artwork that I've done, and have been really helpful, really. And attending stomp dance and participating in that to a certain degree. I know it's a lifetime commitment if you really are doing stomp dance, but they've been kind enough to let me socialize with them, our stomp dancers, and they have taught me a great deal as well.
When you were doing booth shows, who were some of the artists that you admired, or, you know, sometimes you don't necessarily absorb conscious influences, but just being around a certain, you know, certain individuals can be inspirational?
Well, of course, Benjamin Harjo, love his stuff. Mike Larson, I've really known Mike a long time. Back when Doc Tate was still alive, I loved talking to him. He and his wife were just wonderful, and she was Chickasaw. I enjoyed Mavis During. I'd sit and talk to her about basket weaving and all the, you know, wonderful things that she could put together, you know, that I just was at a loss for trying to do myself, and just felt very honored when she gave me a little honeysuckle basket that she had made once. Of course, Dorothy Sullivan, absolutely love her work. It's kind of, to a certain degree, kind of similar to what I
There's some
do
overlap in themes and things.
as far as, you know, the women and family themes, that sort of thing. Don Nito, I believe he's from the Santo Domingo Pueblo. Love his jewelry. He came to one of our festivals once because he was curious about what we did here, and he brought his jewelry and was very well received. And then Chickasaw artist Joanna Underwood does fabulous pottery. She's an incredible artist. And then, of course, Gene Williams, he's no longer with us. He's another Chickasaw artist that I had a lot of respect for his artwork because he represented cultural traditions, little known cultural traditions and beliefs that to the untrained eye, when I first came, I would look and it was like from another world. But after so many years, when you learn some of these things and they're shared with you, suddenly it all makes sense. The paintings that he did, just wonderful, wonderful pieces about the tree of life and you know, the old Mississippian belief systems for, you know, how you belong in the universe and that sort of thing. We have a few of his paintings in our cultural, well, not our cultural center, but in our Council House Museum. And I could stare at those for hours. His work was fabulous.
So were you, approximately how many booth shows were you kind of doing a year when you first got your feet wet?
Golly, well, there's like a season, and we would start out, my mom did a lot of traveling with me, and then after Micah came along, he was sort of forced to come along as well.
You had a show baby.
Yes, I did. Like. We'd set him up under the booth, and he'd have all his toys and whatever, and, you know, kept himself entertained. But when I was doing that, we would start off probably in May, June, like Red Earth would kind of be the kickoff, and then go all the way through until October. That's pretty much where I would cut it off, in October.
Did you go out of state quite a bit?
Sometimes. Would go to the Dallas market, went to Asheville once, but mainly here in Oklahoma.
So, you know, that kind of reminds me that women artists often have different challenges as professional artists than men do. And there were definitely more women artists showing at the time that you started showing professionally, but they still weren't as numerous as men. Were there some special challenges that you faced as a woman artist?
Well, I was single and had a child, and of course you have to haul your stuff. Well, some of it was really heavy. The panels that you would have to, that I used to put up, the panels and the lighting and all of that, and would just have to figure out how I was going to get it there. Because at that time I had a car. I had a little Honda. And somehow I got it all crammed in there along with the baby stuff and my mom, and we'd be off. And but as far as challenges having to do with artwork being accepted, I really didn't have any issues that way. People were very accepting of, I guess, the kind of artwork that I was doing, and I was able to sell art. At the time, though, you really, if you wanted to make money at a show, you needed to win, you know, the competitions.
And I wanted to ask you, what was an important award that you won?
Well, I did really well at Red Earth the first couple of years that I was there, and won in the graphics division, and did really well at Bartlesville. Did well at Dallas Market as well, and so I you know, once you've sort of made up your expenses for the trip, everything else was gravy. You know, if you sold a piece, oh wow, that was great on top of things. Didn't make a whole lot of money, or at least I didn't, on the you know, show circuit or whatever. The money came when people started asking me to do commission work, and that's when really that you know, I could actually make money without a whole lot of expense up front, so to speak. And so that's what I've been doing really for the past 10 years, is mainly commission work. I haven't done a show in a long time because with the work I do here with the tribe, I don't have a whole lot of time to build up an inventory. And you're really gonna have to have an inventory in order to go and set up a booth and all of that. And I just, you know, I'll finish a commission piece and I got another one waiting. And so that's really where the inventory is going. It's pretty much sold before it's finished. And, you know, that's, I prefer it that way.
Yes. So basically the importance of awards is that you're getting these people requesting commissions, and also
I think I got my name out there.
Mm-hmm.
Collectors, you know, I would say, like the idea that there was an award maybe attached to a piece of artwork, but for the most part, they were looking for a certain thing. They had certain tastes in artwork. I find that, you know, they want warriors, or they want something that represents maybe objects, you know, that still life.
like a still life.
Different people like different things, and the people that buy my stuff are looking for the kind of thing that I represent, which is usually women, children, and family type of themes.
Before you came to work for the tribe, though, you worked for a couple of companies as a graphic designer. What did you do for them, and how did those skills carry over into your art?
Well, I worked for, I worked freelance first,
Okay.
and came in contact with a lot of different advertising agencies in Oklahoma City. I would say probably my first job, though, was working for Award Design Metals, which my father got me that job. He was working in the drafting department, and I was straight out of college and needed and wanted an art job, so I was put in the art department designing medallions and belt buckles. And I see these belt buckles even today walking around on men, these big cowboy belt buckles. And that was really my first job. After that, I decided to jump out there and see if I could get into the advertising field and do some illustration for, you know, different clients. And I was able to introduce myself to some agencies in the Oklahoma City area. And one of the agencies was Marcom Incorporated. And they hired me to do a lot of stuff for, you know, car advertising, Schlotzsky's sandwich shops, a mall in Norman, the Sooner Fashion Mall. They were one of my clients.
Now, were you doing visuals, or were you doing text, or both?
I was doing ads. I would illustrate like a Schlotzsky sandwich and then build the ad. Or I would, for the car dealerships, they always had their own clip art and stuff. This is back in the days when you had the wax machine, and you know, you cut the clip art. It was actually clip art. You clipped it out and stuck it through the waxer, and then you set it, you know, into your ad. And so I did a lot of you know, junk mail pieces that would hang on doors and be sent through the mail, that sort of thing. So that was my beginnings in the advertising world. And through that job, and I worked there for 4 years, through that job, I met the folks here at Chickasaw Nation who were in need of a brochure, an economic development brochure that they were going to take to Germany and Japan. And they were going to go on a trip with Bellman, I think it was. I think Governor Bellman was doing some sort of trip for economic development for the state of Oklahoma. And so the tribe had unique, economic development capabilities, being, a sovereign nation. So we, through this agency, we put together a really nice piece. And that was my introduction. And really the tribe wanted to work with us because I was Chickasaw, and this was an opportunity for them to work with the Chickasaw artists. So from that, I was offered a position here. It seems like forever ago, but I was offered a position in their marketing, which was very small. At that time, we had 250 employees here. Everybody knew everybody else.
Wow.
Now we've got well over 10,000 employees working for the tribe. But that's how it started out. They offered me a job if I would move to Ada and do the same thing for them, except working for them and except, not working with the agency so much.
Right.
So that's what I did, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
It's been an amazing changes you've seen. Just quickly about working, in the same place as your dad. That must have been kind of nice too, because you hadn't had that much contact growing up.
It really was, and we got to know each other during that time, and I grew to appreciate his talent. He had a marvelous talent for really three-dimensional, fine jewelry pieces. That's what he did in his off time. Of course, he on the job, he was like me. He was constructing belt buckles and medallions and that sort of thing. But in his off time, he did some beautiful jewelry.
Was it like Indian jewelry or contemporary jewelry?
No, it was contemporary jewelry. He would set stones and that sort of thing in them, and I really didn't have a whole lot of exposure to that sort of thing. And they were delicate and small, really tiny, delicate pieces, very feminine, pretty things. And he did a lot of that for, commission work as well. And then his brother, my uncle Lance, he's a marvelous painter. He works here as well, but his work is just fabulous, the work that he does. And he works in acrylics and oil paints, I believe, but his work is on canvas. And so got really to know him a little bit better as well.
So once you had come to the tribe, had you already gotten your degree, your master's degree in Native Studies, or did that come after?
No,
Okay.
and I don't have my master's. I have the first year of work in that. I had left the tribe because I wanted to get my master's in Native American Studies and Museum Studies.
Approximately like late 80s?
This was well into my career here. Let me think, 2001.
Wow, okay.
2001.
Thank you.
Yeah. I decided that I wanted to become more involved in the construction and really the exhibits at the Chickasaw Cultural Center, which had been a 20-year process. When I first came on board here, I attended meetings with tribal folk in different towns to talk about what they would want in a museum or a cultural center. And this project really meant a lot to me. enough that I wanted to really learn how to put together exhibits and that sort of thing. And so I decided to take a sabbatical, so to speak, and go back to school. And for a year, I studied, to get that degree. And then got a phone call from Governor wanting me to come back to work. And so I did. And still got to work.
But you had that background. Yes.
And still got to work on the Cultural Center and its exhibits and see that to fruition, which was really exciting.
And it's a fabulous museum. You've taught some art classes at various times. Has your teaching impacted your art in any way?
Well, most of the art classes that I've taught have been beginning classes. They've been classes for beginning students, and you actually learn a lot from beginning students, and that was a lot of fun. I haven't got to do that much in the last few years. I just don't have the time, but going back to the basics is always good. Going back and remembering, all of those foundational kind of aspects of putting a piece of art together, I find refreshing, really. And it reminds you of really proper technique and those things that you're trying to show students that they're learning it for the very first time. So I would say, yeah, as far as my own artwork, it reminds me a great deal of really the foundation of what you're supposed to be doing. And sometimes you don't think of that, but you're forced to when you're trying to teach it to somebody else.
You were named a master artist of the 5 tribes. Is that correct or not?
No, and I don't know where that came from.
Came from the internet, but yeah.
A lot of
Thank
people.
you for clarifying.
I will show up at different things that I am making a presentation for, and that will be on my thing, and it's so embarrassing because that
may be a sign that it's coming.
That is something I have not achieved yet, and I'm sure the 5 Tribes Museum is out there thinking, "Wow, that's a little pretentious."
You have not spread that.
So I haven't got there yet. But my Uncle Claiborne, he did.
Yes,
he is a master artist.
I realize you weren't immersed in the gallery scene as long as some people, but I'm wondering what changes you might have noticed from the 80s, the Indian art scene in the 80s and the 90s.
I think Native American artists are a lot more savvy now in the business end of things. They can deal with the gallery owners, I think, a lot more effectively than when I first started out. I didn't care for the whole gallery scene, quite honestly. I didn't like it much, and I've just had some not so good experiences with some of the galleries. As far as you do a lot of the work and weren't making a whole lot of the money at the end of all
or
things.
Being paid promptly. Did you have problems like that?
Yeah, that sort of thing as well. But I because I haven't really involved myself with galleries for quite some time, I really don't know what the scene is like. But I see artists out there now, the young artists coming up, who are, I think, a lot more savvy than I was, and a lot more business-minded than I was back, 20 some odd years ago.
I don't know if you've been on maybe the other side of this, because in 1990 the Indian Arts and Crafts Act was passed, and I usually ask artists how it impacted individual artists and galleries, but from your perspective you were already working for the tribe, and I don't know if you had to, artists also could ask for letters from their tribe, allowing them to call themselves Chickasaw artists. Did you have any experiences with that?
Well, it was interesting because most shows and galleries didn't really in the beginning, understand the law very well. You know, they required a CDIB, and really, if you look at the law, CDIB doesn't really have a thing to do with it. It's whether or not a tribe recognizes you as an artist, you know, that belongs
That can
to them.
represent this particular tribe.
Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of confusion in the very beginning and a lot of controversy. Oh my goodness. You know, a lot of hurt feelings. Some artists that had been working for years and had built a career and reputation as Indian artists suddenly are being questioned, you know, and that was really unfortunate. I never really had to deal with that because I had a CDIB, and that seemed to be all that anybody was interested in. We had discussed here at the tribe, several artists, and of course Lona Barrick, who's over our Arts and Humanities division, had discussed several years ago the law and really what the law seems to require, and the possibility of, you know, putting together a letter that governor might sign. But it's not something that they ever really did, because I think, quite honestly, it's not something that anybody really requires. They ask you for your CDIB, and for the most part, Chickasaw artists have a CDIB, and they present that. So it wasn't really an issue here so much as, you know, it was kind of an interesting time, and to look at other tribes that did have, you know, major issues with it. And also the whole state recognized artists. That was an odd thing that was happening as well.
What's one art award or honor that's been particularly important to you over the years?
Ooh, golly, an honor. I have to say, I am always just thrilled to death when I meet a complete stranger and they know my art, and they'll say, "Oh, I just love your art," or I just love what you wrote in, you know, that book or whatever, because I've also had the opportunity to write while working here and publish a couple of books. That's the biggest honor. As far as the awards and that sort of thing, I would think really recognition from Red Earth, you know, that 1 year for graphics really meant a lot, because I felt like finally reached that place where the tribe and the traditional customs and the theme and the different things that I'd hoped to come together must have, or they wouldn't have recognized that piece of artwork as being superior that year. And that felt good, because then I knew I was on the right track.
Right.
You know.
In 1996, you were part of a select group of artists that got to show their work at the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
Did you apply to be considered for that? Did they contact you?
You know, I'm really not sure how that came about. I was contacted by Lona Barrick, you know, and right now she's the administrator over Arts and Humanities, and she said, "Hey, we're going to get together a group of people," and I think this museum contacted her, and they were part of the Olympic program, in which they were trying to represent artists that were indigenous to the area, so that, you know, these countries from all over the world were coming in, and they wanted to show Native American art. And so they had to contact us here in Oklahoma, because we no longer are in our homelands. And so we said, yeah, we'll come there. And it was just two of us representing the Chickasaw Nation. It was me and Joanna Underwood. She brought her pottery, and I brought my paintings. And we loaded up a van and drove out there. Lucky me, I got to fly, but Lona and Joanna and another lady, Gingy Nail, they drove all of my paintings and the panels and, you know, all the stuff you have to haul, and of course all of Joanna's wonderful pottery out to Atlanta. And we set up, and it was really a terrific week because we got to meet so many different people, and not only people from the Olympics, but other artists, you know, from the area were represented as well. We were just sort of the Indian faction. You know?
Right. So you were at the museum that whole week, sort of,
Yes.
meeting people.
Yes. And we never really got down to where the Olympics were going on. Most of our activities took place there at the museum, and, you know.
And that might have been fortunate because I think they
Yes.
had that terrorist bombing there.
That was the one evening that we had free, and we thought we would go down there. And I just wasn't up to it. I was dead tired, and so we didn't end up going, and it was a good thing. It was a good thing we didn't.
A blessing. Had you been to the Southeast prior to that, or visited historical sites in the Chickasaw homelands?
No. My first trip, actual trip that concentrated on the homelands and different sites, was probably about 5 years ago. And that was an extraordinary trip. And I had been to the Southeast before, but it was mainly to Memphis and, you know, places like Elvis Presley's
Yeah.
Graceland and that sort of thing. And so to have the opportunity to actually go and take a tour of historic sites along the Natchez Trace and in Alabama on Bear River and that sort of thing, that was great. That was fantastic. And I had a great tour guide. She, at that time, well, she's Chickasaw. At that time, she's working for the National Park Service, and she agreed to take us around and show us all of these, you know, little known places and tell us stories about them. So, and you get a wonderful feeling. I don't even know how to describe it when you visit where your ancestors came from and where they're buried. I have to take that back. I did go to various museums during my NAGPRA days.
Okay.
I worked as a
Yeah, you wanna
NAGPRA
explain?
representative.
Native American Graves and Repatriation Act.
Yes, I was asked to participate on a negotiations type of committee for the tribe, and also for the 5 civilized tribes. One of their representatives during our, I guess the first part of the NAGPRA days when museums were having to declare what they had. And I went and visited the homelands then, because there were human remains and funerary objects that we had to decide what to do with and develop a policy for that. We could either allow the museum to continue to curate, or we could take them and put them in our own museum, which I don't think was ever a consideration, or to rebury them, which 9 times out of 10 that's what we did. But that was the first time I actually went to the homelands. I'd forgotten about that. I can't believe that. That was such a big part of really my learning experiences, especially with traditional people, because they would accompany us as well for a better understanding of what was proper, you know, in dealing with, you know, the deceased and their objects.
So here, or at the Chickasaw Press, you've obviously used your artistic skills, and as well as some writing skills on several of the publications.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that particular combination?
Oh, I really did. You know, I was real nervous about it because I had never really published a book before, and we were required to publish 4 books a year. And
Oh, that's interesting. Is that from the tribe? That's
Uh-huh.
the requirement? Okay.
yeah, from the tribe, they wanted us to at least put out 4 books a year, and they would always come out in October. So we had basically a year to get 4 books completed.
That's not a lot of time.
It was not a lot of time, but fortunately, we had some really, really nice manuscripts that had been submitted to us. People, who had been waiting forever for somebody to take an interest in their work, and there just wasn't an interest in some of the books that were being written about Southeastern history and culture because there wasn't a market. That seems to be what most publishing houses are. They're looking at the numbers. Who's going to buy this? How much money are we going to make? And that was never the goal or the mission of the Chickasaw Press. They just wanted to get the information out there to the people and to allow for an outlet for not only Chickasaw and Native American authors, but authors that wrote about us, for them to have an opportunity to have their book published. And so there were a lot of really good manuscripts, and that made it a whole lot easier and very exciting.
And you proved there was a market after you
there
published
was.
them. You've done some different types of board and service work, but one of your positions has been on the Oklahoma Film Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a bit and the intersections, I guess, between your research and your visual art?
When early on in my career here at the tribe, I had the opportunity to serve on that commission, and I think it's because I served on several committees with the Oklahoma Indian Affairs Commission, and so my name was submitted and I was appointed, and it really was an eye-opening experience to meet a lot of the folks that are in the film industry here in Oklahoma, because when you think of film, or at least when I thought of film, I thought of where I came from, which was Hollywood, California, maybe New York. But we had really quite an active film industry here. If you're looking at locations or if you're looking at actors, oh my goodness, Native American actors here, from Oklahoma, are the best anywhere. And had the opportunity to meet Casey Hornick and Richard, I can't remember his name. Yes.
Yeah.
And just in the projects that they were working on, it was very exciting. And during that time, there seemed to be a lot of, friction between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. But that seems to have subsided somewhat over the years. But it's just, it was an exciting time for me because I was learning new things and meeting a lot of new and interesting people and learning about the film industry and how it worked here and how it worked, period, anywhere else. And that was I still can't believe, that I had that opportunity, and it has led me to what I'm doing right now.
I was going to say, and that segues nicely into your latest project, which is?
It is a movie. The Chickasaw Nation, for the last several years, has sort of committed themselves to producing family-friendly Native American-based movies. Because there seemed to be a need for Indian tribes to tell their story in their own way instead of being interpreted by others. And this was something that Governor Anatoly was really interested in. And so he jumped out there with the first movie, which was Pearl, which was about Pearl Carter Scott, a lady that was an early aviator, and a very young early aviator. And The movie has met with great reviews. I wrote a play about Pearl eons ago, but I wasn't really involved in the movie itself. However, the United Nations had a program that was interested in showing indigenous people's films to high school kids, and ours fit right into that program. And so they asked me to participate, me and several others here, to participate in writing curriculum for that. And so we did that, and we presented not too long ago to the UN.
Cool.
To a group of kids that had come, and that was a lot of fun. So I was asked to move into this project, which was about Teata. It's going to be a film project about somebody that nearly every Chickasaw knows about, and that's Teata Fisher. And she was a storyteller and an entertainer from, I guess, when she graduated from high school in 1919 all the way up until, she was unable to perform anymore and she retired probably 1980s. So she had this hugely wonderful, long career of telling stories and singing and representing Native American culture to the King and Queen of England, to the Roosevelts, and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands and thousands of children, which seemed to be her favorite audience, really. And so I've had this past weekend the opportunity to sit down and interview several of her family members, people that knew her the best. And that was an exciting thing to do. But we are now engaged in trying to write a script about her life. And that's the project I'm working on now and pulling my hair out. And but it's very exciting. It's something brand new for me once again. But it's a chance to use my writing skills to do a movie script now. That and some of the cultural knowledge that I've gotten over the years can also be used. It gives me a little bit of an insight into, where she came from, because her family were language speakers and her father was very traditional. So it's I think a unique opportunity for myself, but also for the tribe to show some of their oral traditions and some of the things that she was known for, and really what she had hoped to accomplish with her career and her life.
I think that sounds really exciting. So your primary tools are colored pencil.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like about colored pencil?
Oh gosh, they're very forgiving. And so is oil paint, but the pencils are a whole lot cleaner and easier to manage than oil painting. It takes longer to work with colored pencils because you have to layer one color over another to get the desired effect or the type of light that you're hoping for. So it takes a tremendous amount of time. That's why most of the pieces you see in colored pencil are kind of small, because it just it's so time consuming. But once you get through with one, it's so rewarding because you've got what you wanted and hoped for. And I like to deal with a lot of very intricate pattern and that sort of thing, and pencils are great for that. Paint, not so much, but pencils, you just grind that pencil down to a fine tip, and you can pretty much get what you want.
And when you say forgiving, I hadn't thought about it, but does that mean you can actually erase colored pencil?
Yes.
I get you.
If you treat it right,
Mm-hmm.
you can erase, and you can pick things up. But you have to plan ahead of time. It's
Mhm.
not something that you can just slap on there and then think you're going to erase a large section of it, because that's not going to happen. So then you have to have it well planned out ahead of time. But if there's something that you don't quite like, you can pick it up in small, areas.
Right. Portraits seem to be a strong thread of your work. What do you try to convey with those?
I find people so interesting. I love talking to people and finding out what they're about and what their interests are. And I find people's faces interesting, what they wear, how they do their hair. All of that is just something that I enjoy depicting. And I guess it's just simply comes from the fact that I'm a people person. I just love talking to people and finding out what they're about. As far as themes for people, I get to know people and I try to represent, what they're about through portraiture. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but I find that if I know them very well, the artwork comes out better for some reason than if I don't know them very well at all.
That's neat. I've heard that the eyes in a portrait, or when you're painting, for example, a portrait of someone are kind of challenging. Is that
Yes.
something you found is true?
Yes, and I've taken a lot of classes with folks who can do eyes well, because eyes and hands seem to be difficult. Not only the structure and trying to replicate them on a two-dimensional surface, but also if you don't get the hands and the eyes right, you don't get the person right. You don't get the essence of what maybe they're doing or who they're about right. And that's why I will always do a face first, because if you don't get the face right, there's no point in moving on, as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, if you don't get the eyes in there correctly and they're not doing what they need to be to represent that person's, personality, then you've lost the piece. It's time to start over.
Obviously, drafting skills are important for you. Do you do preliminary sketches for
Mhm.
your colored pencil work?
I work entirely from photographs, and I will, because people just are bored to tears if they have to sit there for you, and that's just excruciating. And most of my people are real people. They're not models. They're not people that, are used to it. So I work with photographs, and in the early days I would use my own photographs. But I didn't much care for the lighting. I didn't know enough about photography to really light them the way that I wanted them to be lit. And then, of course, I didn't have the person there, so it would be hard to really try and remember, okay, how did that actually go? Because the photograph, it'll lie to you. So I made friends with a very good photographer. His name was Matt Bradbury, and for the last several years, he's been setting the lights. I'll stand back and I'll say, don't like it that way, and he'll move it around and adjust it. I don't know what I'm talking about. I just know what I like. And he'll get the lights right and shoot the photographs, and I have been much happier with the final results in the artwork when I use his photography. I don't know if that's cheating or not, but I prefer, to use photographs that I know that I've had some input on the lighting for. And even when I'm trying to do the photography myself, I don't have input because I don't know what I'm doing. And I suppose I should take the time and do photography class, but it takes years to understand the whole lighting thing. And I've been very fortunate that Matt has, and he likes doing it. It's exciting for him. I've been fortunate that he has allowed me to prevail upon him to shoot my folks.
That sounds like a good solution. How important is humor in your work?
Oh, I think it's very important. I want folks to feel good when they take a look at a piece of my artwork. That's why I've never really done a removal piece. And I know that it's a popular thing among the 5 tribes for artists to do removal pieces. But for me, I feel like it's been done.
Mm-hmm. And this is Indian removal
Yes,
from
I'm sorry.
the
Yeah.
southeast to Oklahoma.
Mhm.
That's okay.
It's been done, and it's been done. A Chickasaw removal has been done, and I look at that, and it's an outstanding piece by Tom Phillips, and it's like the quintessential removal piece. And it's like, well, you get a certain feeling when you come back from it, but it's not the feeling that I want people to have when they look at my art. I know it's important, you know, but it's really not something. I would probably get so depressed trying to complete a removal piece. Most of my work, I try to infuse family and, you know, women, children, and those events and activities that might be, you know, something considered small and, you know, not very important, but are tremendously important, not only to the families, but to the tribe as a whole. Those storytelling moments, those moments when recipes are shared from one generation to the next, taking care of a child, nurturing, that sort of thing. That seems to be what trips my trigger.
Can you, just following up on that, representations of women and children often are mothers, grandmothers, and those nurturing bonds. Can you comment on the importance of women in Chickasaw culture?
Oh, tremendously important. Women are tremendously important and always have been down through the centuries. We were a matrilineal society. You belonged to your mother's family when you were born. And it's not to say that men weren't important. They were. But women and their roles were always the glue that sort of kept everything together, that kept the tribe together socially. It was the elder women that knew who was related to who and who could actually marry who,
right.
You know, that sort of thing. And it's a little known fact, but there was an elder group of women down through the centuries that was always consulted before any decisions of war took place, because they came at it from a totally different perspective. And it was always considered important to consult with these ladies. So I think today we have women in really important positions at the tribe on a government level, but on a family level, there's always that matriarch. There's always that one lady who everybody goes to, who's got all the answers, who knows pretty much everything there is to know about how you're related to other people still, and, you know, the important decisions in life. I mean, everybody goes to that person because they're the ones with the experience and the knowledge. Grandfathers are important for that also, but grandmas seem to know what the family is about. They seem to know everything there is to know about anything having to do with the family, and I think that is extremely important, especially in this day and age. And for Chickasaws, you know, Governor Anatubby and this administration also seems to want to provide whatever they can to help the family. And I agree with that. And so I like to represent family. I had a great family, and growing up, I have wonderful memories, and I like to depict those.
You know, taking up this notion of, you know, the group of kind of council of women that would be consulted before Chickasaws went to war. when you focus on these less well-known aspects of Chickasaw culture, is one of your goals to educate other Indian people as well as non-Indians?
Yes. And there are certain things you don't depict. There are certain things in our culture that it's just not allowed to be told. At least not by me, and not in artwork that will be seen by non-Chickasaws. But a lot of the work that I do, I have the opportunity to educate about the things that are special in our culture that can be told. And that's great. That part of writing about the illustration is just as important to me as doing the illustration itself, because it allows me the opportunity to maybe explain something about what somebody's wearing or what somebody's doing, or the event that this person may be, involved in. Those things are important and may be lost on folks that aren't familiar with the culture. And unfortunately, with our tribe, we've lost a lot of that. And there's a real hunger out there, especially among Chickasaws outside of Oklahoma, who want to know more, who want to read more, and it's like they just want to absorb whatever they can, because it is part of their identity. And being able to share those things is immensely rewarding for me personally. But because, I was lucky enough to have them shared with me at one point or another.
What is your creative process?
Oh, sometimes it's dreams. Sometimes I will see something and I'll think, oh, that was so neat, I need to do that. And sometimes with commission pieces, I'm just asked to put together something that represents a central theme. The last really big project that I worked on was for St. Anthony's Hospital, and somebody came to me and said, I will pay for this project, but we're donating it to St. Anthony's Hospital. And so they wanted something, and they really didn't nail me down on anything. They just said, we want something that will represent abundance and good health and, just fullness of life. And I had seen a lady here at the tribe who reminded me a lot of all of that in her traditional regalia. And I decided to use some symbolism with her, and she very graciously agreed to allow me to photograph her. We photographed her with corn and a blackbird, which represents a lot of very positive things having to do with good health and abundance and that sort of thing. And it was a very large painting, probably one of the largest ones that I've ever done. And I decided to do it in oil. And that was a different way of going at it. I was kind of given the general idea of what they wanted to have hanging on the wall, and then I was left to try and pull it together. But for the most part, it could be anything. Like I said, a dream, something I just see in passing.
Will you sketch it real quickly, or just
yes,
keep it
I
in your head?
have my little stick figures. I'll talk about it more than anything in a little diary that I have. I'll talk about, okay, I saw this and this is what it represents to me, and I could use this, and I could use that. And then all of these little ideas get stored up in a diary, and eventually I'll get around to them, but for the most part it's just a diary with a lot of little ideas. Because right now I haven't had the opportunity to really do a whole lot of my own artwork.
You've explained very nicely your interest in people. I don't see a lot of really developed landscapes in your work, but I do see a lot of animal imagery, and often people and animals coupled together. And I wondered if you could talk about that from, a Chickasaw cultural viewpoint?
Well, animals played a really, and still do, play a really big role in a lot of cultural ideas, a lot of cultural belief systems within the tribe. Oral tradition, for instance, a lot of our stories are animals talking to each other about complicated issues. And I'm lucky enough to get to illustrate a book with some of those animal stories in it. But I use the animals usually to try and illustrate either a cultural statement that I'm trying to make, or for instance with the raccoon clan and the bird clan, the little boy and little girl, sort of my interpretation of Pinky and Blue Boy. It was an opportunity to represent a couple of clans, and the bird clan was a big warrior clan for the tribe, and the raccoon clan was also a very interesting clan. So it was an opportunity to talk about those two clans, and so I put the animal figures in there to also illustrate that. That's pretty simplistic there. Some of the other things that I've done, like the journey, where I'm using animals and different objects, are a little more complicated and in-depth. That takes a little more explanation to go into, because not everybody understands what some of the symbolism means, especially the Mississippian period symbols.
Right.
You have to do a little bit of study there to figure out what some of those different symbols represent. And I try to use those to basically harken back to that old system of belief, and that everything was based in nature. Everything had a purpose, and the purpose wasn't always right there in front of your face. Some of it was hidden. And talking about the three different levels of what Chickasaws used to believe the universe was about, the tree of life, those types of things, they all, I find, just immensely interesting, and all kinds of opportunity arise from these things to talk about, how intricate and how special, Chickasaw culture really is and was. It's kind of a new avenue that I'm going in lately, but it's something that I think is important. We really started using a lot of that with the Cultural Center, and trying to explain, what some of this means in some of the programs down there. And a lot of our printed pieces has, the different symbols from that period. And they're beautiful. They're beautiful symbols. And they each have, a meaning, and they have a purpose. And putting them in the artwork now not only gives it a southeastern flavor or feel, but also there is meaning there that I can convey beyond what I've used in the past.
What has been one of the high points in your art career so far?
Getting to work on books and using some of the cultural knowledge and art in designing books. That was pretty cool. Having the opportunity to paint and actually get paid for it, or to draw and actually get paid for it, that people will pay me money to do this. That's really a pretty high point for me. But also, I think in my art career, just having the opportunity to study and to talk to the elders about our culture and our traditions, because they are the receptacles of all that knowledge, and to just be lucky enough to get to talk to them, not only about what they know about culture, but about their lives, what exciting lives they've lived. They grew up in a time when it wasn't very popular to be an Indian person. In fact, the federal government was trying to assimilate them, yet they hung on to the language, they hung on to these beliefs, and they lived events in their lives that were exciting and sometimes horrific, and I've seen so many things in the 20th century, and what their perspective is. That's a high point, and really the art is what brought me to that, more than anything else.
What has been a low point in your art career?
A low point, not getting to do it as much as I want to. I feel very guilty about that. I really do. I get irritated at myself because I'll come home dead tired and I might have 2 hours that I could be working on artwork, and I just want to hit the hay, and then I lay there and feel really bad about it. But I would say I wish I had more time. I wish I had more time to do the artwork. But the projects that I work on for the tribe are just as important to me. And they're very time consuming, and they're not, it's never been a 9-to-5 job. It's weekends, it's nights, it's whenever other people are available to talk to me. That's when, I get a lot of my work done. So I would say artwork, not getting to do it, that's a low point.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or anything we forgot to mention?
I have a son.
Good.
He is also very interested in art, but and in his younger years he did a lot of drawing and a lot of painting, but he has sort of transferred that to videography, and it's a medium I don't know anything about, but he has that same kind of drive and interest and obsession that I had about drawing. He has it for videography and putting together, video projects, and that's exciting to see. That's really neat, because I can see in him a lot of the way I was, when I first started out with the artwork. Only he's into video. And I'm very proud of the projects he's put together, I have to say. He's very good. So
That's neat. So that artistic
it's another
legacy
generation down, yeah.
is ongoing. All right. Well, we're going to take a look at some of your artwork.
Okay.
And would you like to tell us about this piece?
Okay. This piece is called A New Day Dawning, and I was asked to participate in a project a few years back in which we celebrated the 150th anniversary of our Chickasaw Constitution. And so I was asked to put together a piece of artwork that they could put on print pieces and develop a poster out of, and note cards and that sort of thing. And of course, I immediately went to what women might have thought, about this Constitution. At the time, there was a newspaper called the Chickasaw Intelligencer that was out there. I did a little bit of research, could not find the actual newspaper, so I made my own up. But I thought, women would be reading about this. Chickasaw women, they would be interested in knowing what this new Constitution was about, and when it was going to be ratified, and they would be attending, the big constitutional, discussion and event that took place at Pennington Creek, down in what was then Tishomingo City. It's Tishomingo now. And so I thought, we'll have these two ladies read, the newspaper and find out about what this Constitution was about. It was a brand new way of looking at tribal government for us, and of course the ladies would be involved. But I used ladies that work here at the tribe
Okay.
as my models. And they, again, very graciously allowed me to photograph them reading the newspaper.
All right, and a good example of your realistic style here. And now we're looking at a couple of cards, reproductions of originals. Would you like to talk about those?
Well, the one with the man, the Indian man with the baby, that is actually my son, Micah, and his father. He was just not very old at all there, and I just took a photograph of them sleeping, not in buckskin. I mean, they were in. He was in a t-shirt, a pair of jeans, but I included the buckskin, and I just thought, what a sweet, sweet picture. And this seems to really resonate with a lot of moms.
I was wondering, because it's such a nice father bonding,
Yeah.
kind of father nurturing picture.
The other one is The Storyteller, and it is a piece that I did several years ago with Glenda Galvan. She was telling stories with a group of children, and she's one of our traditional storytellers. Her stories have been passed down in her family for many generations. And of course, most of them are about animal stories. And in the background, the trees back there are actually animals. Some of the animals that you would see in these stories. So I did this as something I wanted to do. This is a piece that I wanted to do. And the tribe liked it so much, they used it as a theme that particular year for their festival, oral tradition, and paying homage to the elders and like that. So it worked out well. It worked out well for them to have a printed piece, and for me to get to do a piece of artwork that I've been wanting to do for some time.
Yeah, you want to tell us what this picture is?
This is the Tree of Life, and I wanted to do something that would represent one of the central ideas in old Chickasaw beliefs about how the world was and how it was put together. But I wanted to do it in such a way that it would be of interest to children, that children might be able to connect with it. And it's a tree. And the upper part of the tree and its branches stretch into the heavens. The middle part of the tree is actually where we are at on earth, and then the roots of the tree go into the underworld. And it's an explanation of how the world is, basically. You have the heavenly body, which everything is in order, everything is the way it should be. And then you've got chaos that takes place down in the underneath world where the roots are. And we are in the middle, constantly being impacted between chaos and perfect order. And of course, their animals are part of that. And if you went with the strict Mississippian belief of what these animals are, anything with wings would be from the heavens. Anything that flies is from that part of the world that is got perfect order, and anything that is below the water would be from a place of chaos. And then there are supernatural animals, which I did not represent here, but and some of those animals can travel in between all of these different parts of the universe through different portals in old Mississippian belief. But I tried to represent that in a way that kids might connect with, and make the animals whimsical and kind of fun. And this was a departure for me.
Yes,
this is more of a cartoony kind of illustration.
Nice to see.
And it was fun.
I bet. And we'll just go ahead and look at a couple of the other illustrations for the same, will be for the same book, just
Okay.
different.
Yeah, this is the cover. This will be the cover
Okay.
for the book. And then this is Crawfish and the Creation Story. That's one of the illustrations for that first story in the book, which talks about how the earth was created. And the story starts out where all the animals of the earth are on a raft. And I got to thinking, well, how am I going to represent that? And I thought, they're going to be really crowded. And they're just going to be somewhat uncomfortable. Some of them are looking off into other areas, you know, and wondering, hey, what are we doing here? And so that's how I represented really the raft. And then I put some Mississippian period symbols in the raft itself. But the story is basically about how Crawfish was able to fix the dilemma because they're on this watery waste, floating aimlessly, and he said, why don't I go down and bring some mud up? Why don't I create earth? And so that's what this one is, and it'll be on another page.
Yes.
Basically like that,
Right.
you know, on that side. But he will, and he's got his mud chimney there.
Yes, you've captured all the texture there. But
And he is starting to create earth.
oh,
And of course, I included the buzzard in the first one because the buzzard created the valleys and the mountains with his wings later on. But this is the first story, and the next story will be about a duck, her babies, and a wolf.
well, we look forward to seeing this book come out, and I want to thank you, Jeannie, for your time today.
Well, thank you. This was such a pleasure. I've had a great time.